It's Joyful Christian Hermit. I have to admit I'm worse today. Getting up, just the sickness, my sinuses, but my lungs are better. I keep taking the NAC. I take this Mucinex for lungs. It's old, I've had for a long time. But using it up, and asked my neighbor, they're going to Costco tomorrow to pick up something for sinuses. I've used up all my sinus over the counter trying to get my sinuses cleared out. I continue to take kelp morning and night, kelp capsules, supposed to help drain, but it's just socked in. So we're into week 9 of this sickness, and I've just been very dizzy when I try to get up, and not appetite, but I'm eating healthy. So I'm doing my best I can, and doing my listening to a certain degree. Listen, wait. And I've had some things come to mind, God saying things, not in any dramatic way. I think that's what we have to understand. It's just that still small voice. It's a thought that will just flash in. And even with the videos, I had this thought again. I found more on psychopaths and the symptoms. And I just want everyone to realize, in my opinion and from my experience of being married to one that had a lot of psychopath in them, maybe a little sociopath, but sort of a combination, but they're distinctive. He really had the sociopath nailed for a womanizing, or it doesn't have to be a man with a woman, but they have love to cheat, love to philander, and lying. So much lying. But then psychopaths do that too. But he's got a lot of the psychopath, and it helps me to understand and put together, if I have flashbacks of situations, just what I was dealing with. And the reality is that you can't deal with them. The remedy for people with if you're involved with someone like that is getting away from them. And that's sad. You have to really understand that the marriage was fraudulent from the start. If you were Catholic and got an annulment, it would be an easy annulment because they don't present themselves as they truly are. They live a lie. But my whole thing is now just the vast amount of people with personality disorders, not just psychopath, and they're not the killer psychopaths. That's, not that prevalent, but it happens, and then that gets the attention, and the movies are made about those, the thriller movies. But all kinds of disorders, personality disorders, they're called. That's why I recommend familiarizing yourself. We all have personalities, and we have characteristics, and we need to try our best to keep in balance. If you get too many markers, you need to do something about it. I grew up with a wonderful, she was my best friend for years and years, and her mother was this way, I realized as an adult, and she picked it up environmentally, and maybe some a little bit hereditary, because obsessive compulsive personality disorder is not the same as obsessive compulsive. But that developed in her. And the older she became, the more. So you'd have to look up obsessive compulsive personality disorder differentiated from obsessive compulsive. They're the ones with the manic hand washing and germ phobia and all that. The obsessive compulsive personality disorder is different. has different tendencies, similar but different. And it's much more subtle, a little harder to discern, and can really wreak havoc on a marriage and family relationship, because the person thinks they're okay and no one else is. It gets into that. And very difficult to live with someone like that up close and personal. I didn't recognize it till later on. I suspected as an adult, but we didn't live near each other. And then, but I could just tell from certain signals. I won't go into it in detail, but the perfectionism even of a package coming, and excessive tape, and everything perfect and extreme to that point. But the person's talent and gifts were used in a way that the more precise, the better the product. So it worked for the person, and that was fine. But in the relationship, I didn't realize until I was with them for a while. And then I realized, and it was very unfortunate. And it ended up causing a rift in our friendship, but it wasn't healthy, and it wasn't going to work out well. So these things happen. But it's not even just that disorder or any particular disorder. What gets me is that it's very rampant in our society. Personality disorders of various types. And it's a sickness, and it's sad, but it can really get out of hand, all of the different types of personality disorders. And I think it's rampant in our society. So that's why I recommend studying up about them. And also just for your relationships and for long-term relationships. For young people when you're dating or going to marry, to know and understand and go into things with your eyes open, educated about these situations. And if you're working with people, if they're in your company or on your staff or part of your social group or at workplace, with some of them, you really need to know what you're dealing with. It's best to have, in order to have a chance at a balanced life, and not to get too caught up with someone who's ill. It's an illness, a personality illness, these different disorders. There's now bipolar, we hear a lot about that, but antisocial personality disorder is another one. I mentioned the obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and then the full, the regular obsessive compulsive, sociopath, psychopath. There's many. And every now and then, probably once a year, I'll go through the DSM diagnostic, maybe symptom manual of psychology. DSM, they're up to the DSM-V now. And I will say that in the 80s, they took out the homosexual as being a personality disorder, because it became a political thing, and it remains that to this day, that the sexual disorders are still disorders, but they were removed from the psychological manual in the 80s for political reasons. Started in 73, and then by 86 they totally removed. But don't be ignorant about these things. They had a huge lobby. the LBGT, whatever Q, and some of the psychologists union didn't want to deal with that, didn't want to touch it, it's becoming very political. But the accurate diagnosis remains. I just looked it up the other day. It's not in the DSM-V. It's taken out in the DSM-3. Back when I was working on my doctorate in clinical psych. It had just been taken out the year before, finally, 86. So but, those who really want to get help with their any kind of sexual disorder can still. You have to be an adult to go on your own. But it's sort of sad that parents can't take their children in against the law, I think. So, but we live with these things, and we need to be alert to them because it affects everyone's lives within our families. And I'm not talking the sexual disorders, but within society, the other disorders, really, I think, far worse. Because they can become rather malicious, manipulative, and destructive of others' lives. And the sexual disorders, really not so much at all. But it's naive to think, to try to say it's normal as God created a normal human. No. Or healthy, it's disordered, out of order, but it's not harming others. In fact, I think it's the least harmful. It's a personal thing. I've often taken time just to meditate on what if I had been born with the same sex attraction or developed it through environment or something that had happened to me sexually that threw me off, which is usually the way it happens with women. Now, men, though, it can be more of a genetic, a more testosterone or more progesterone, depending, in one person or another, that causes them to have more masculine or more feminine genetically. And but I think society has become very understanding, accepting, and it would just be up to the person, him or herself. When we get into the surgeries on children, that can get very bad, in my opinion, and in many opinions, and in science too, clinical studies. Then when they outgrow feeling like they were really a more masculine or more feminine, these children and a teenage or older, then to reverse all that surgery is very horrific. So for them. But anyway, aside from that, I wanted to mention these. Mercy, no, I've given you treats and you promised me. You promised you'd be good. Stop. No, go to bed. Go, get in your crate. They've been out. They've been treated many times. I think it's a good thing to be aware and it's not just in a sport or workplace. It can be someone you're married to or dating, and you don't recognize these traits because you're not thinking about it. But we have to be more alert to these more disorders that are really damaging in relationships or in competitions, in workplace. They can be very, very competitive, and it becomes evil. They become so distorted and so desperate, like psychopaths can be, that it disrupts and can really You're better off if you are away from the person, even if it has caused damage to your own career, because of how dangerous it can become in a psychological mess for you. So awareness, I'm sure this one person that I'd been, thinking about, if had gotten out of that partnership immediately, had known, hadn't been deceived, would have fared far better. Far, far better. Okay, interpersonal relationships of psychopaths. Glib, superficial charm. Got to get my glasses on and I'll start petting Mercy with one hand. I've given them lots of attention, but this is rough on them, having me sick and not up and around. So, and taking them out, and we go out, but they can't get to the dog park. Well, it's so much snow we wouldn't go anyway. But okay, glib, superficial charm, grandiose sense of self-worth, pathological lying, conning and manipulative. Like I say, it doesn't have to be any kind of a great con artist scheme. It can be somebody you're around or even you think is a friend for a while until they backstab you or become envious or have manipulated you and you don't realize it. And not into doing crimes or things like that. Not talking about, that's more rare. The extremism they put in the movies, or you read about someone in the newspaper who was a serial killer or something. These are just otherwise everyday people, married with children even, but sick, psychologically sick. It's not mental illness. At some point they chose. It started out usually environmental issues or things, or felt they weren't good enough or something, so they started striving. Or a parent had, symptoms of it, but not full blown. With these disorders, it's a matter of understanding the markers, the symptoms, and then even in the DSM-V, which you can look up online, you will see, it'll say if you're beyond 7 or 9 markers, then it's an issue. Or if the person is. Or 6, more than 6 of these markers. Because all of us have tendencies. It's a matter of us understanding, working on ourselves to make sure we don't have too many. Get out of bounds. Keep healthy, psychologically healthy. And the Christian life, a true Christian life, and religious practices, holiness, humility, and all virtues, practicing the virtues will be a great way to avoid becoming psychologically out of bounds in some way or another. Affective factors. They lack remorse or guilt. And that is so true. But you don't realize it if you're around them until you're closer with them and something happens and they have absolutely no guilt for what they've done, no remorse. They won't say they're sorry, or it won't be sincere if they parrot it. Emotionally shallow. They don't have the normal emotions of others. A callous, they're callous, hardened, and a lack of empathy. If you're injured or sick or hurt, they won't care. It's what you've inconvenienced them, or they're just hard and cold about it. Failure to accept responsibility for their own actions. It's always someone else's fault. Someone else caused them this or that. It could be someone in high school who wants to be better student or something, and if they get an A minus, well, somebody caused them that, or the teacher wasn't fair. Or, I mean, they get, there's a sense of obsessiveness with it, that's for sure. With this, they get sort of manic about what they want, driven. And will go to any means to get what they want. And it can be everyday kinds of things, or it can get into more criminal type stuff or immoral type things. So they need stimulation and have a proneness to boredom. They always want to be doing something or have something to occupy. They can't be, they're not centered within themselves or at peace particularly with themselves. They have a parasitic lifestyle where other people have to kowtow to them or support them or their needs, take care of them. It's all about them. It's a very selfish type of thing. Lack of realistic long-term goals. They have a short-term goal, like of winning or being better than someone that they envy or resent, or it could be just anyone. This need to be superior, and so they will go for that. Short term. It's not like they have a long-range idea of doing something great for others or for society or something of worth in their lives. It's more self and singularly motivated of something that will bring them more esteem, more grandiosity. It can happen among Christians, among hermits even. Get envious of another or resent that there's another one online, and then go trying to destroy the other and do whatever they can then to have that grandiose sense. I'm not saying anyone I'm just saying it could be like that even in a Christian aspect. Giving examples is what I'm doing. Impulsivity can be irresponsible. Let's see if there's any other. Move this down. I'd already given different aspects of it before. The other day I did. Let me see if there's any more. I think those are the main ones. I think my point is to educate ourselves on what I and I think others have come to an understanding or a notice that personality disorders in the last 20 to 30 years have become the prevalent sickness of society in various types of disorders, of personality disorders. So, in a very healthy, religious, spiritual life, practicing the virtues, prayer life, and love. But by the time they're adults or even teens, some of these different disorders, like narcissism's another personality disorder. I've mentioned that before. Narcissism. And narcissism often is with these other disorders combined with it. Narcissism is one that is often combined with like obsessive compulsive, but more so even with sociopath, psychopath, also considered antisocial personality disorder, has narcissism with it, borderline and narcissism go well together. Not well, but they mesh and it works. It develops in them more. The narcissism and the borderline together. That's, in fact, Dr. H had said that's a big one that links together, is borderline personality order often has narcissism with it. But we can pray about these things, these disorders, and do what we can to make sure we're within bounds of these different characteristics. Everybody, we're all bored at some point in time or another. And we all like stimulation at one time or another. Don't let it get out of hand. But that has to start, and watch your children or grandchildren. It starts early, these things, do these tendencies, and you don't realize that they're growing, they're expanding, they're irresponsibility, the lying. Kids go through a phase of lying. Mercy, come here. But, if they don't get out of that, it becomes part of sociopath and psychopath way of being. Conning and manipulative. I know a youngster who became, and just have to be very, you have to get them out of that. Can't let it grow. And you can't assume it's just going to go away. If it keeps up a lot, get the child to therapy and say, this is what I see going on. Let the therapist, clinical psychologist, go for the best you can get. One with a PhD. And check around and see if they're good. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about on this. And help our society. Stop that. Come here. I'll have to see what she got up here now. She's been wanting. So I'll stop and give her extra much attention and see what I can do to. We even got a toy she hadn't used in a while. That was fun for a little bit, but she's maybe becoming a little psychopath or something. Oh, just kidding. But it's a serious thing. And I'll have to say that had I known about these symptoms and things, maybe, although I've been told by Dr. H after the fact that it's easy to get deceived by them. You fall in love. Very charming, as it says, charming, glib. They're successful people. Don't think that they're out there just, the murdering types, the weirdos that you would, in the freak shows, the movies that are thrillers, and you're watching and you think, oh, notice this. It that can be, but typically they're everyday out there, successful, school teacher, principal, superintendent, sports players, married with kids. And in that setting, I think it will explode sooner than later, because in sports, your body doesn't stay with you all forever, And the losing will come. It's already started to come with this one person. And she flipped out. But no one, people think, oh, well, just temper, or, well, they know. No, they don't, they know the person, but they don't know that she's a psychopath. Maybe if somebody aware of the symptoms might realize this is a verifiable psychopath in all the categories. She's out of bounds, but they don't recognize it. They're so far into it, and would have had to been caught probably in middle school, or young, maybe a little younger, but definitely middle school, high school. And parents, that's why it's good for parents and grandparents to be aware. And then it's hard for a parent to realize. And it's upsetting. And then to realize you've got to get the child to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And it's heartbreaking. I know that from some experience too. But it has to be done. You have to face reality and help them before it becomes where you can't. And then they can get dangerous. Any of them can. An obsessive compulsive is probably the easiest to catch. The one, with the excessive hand washing and wringing and germ phobic and all these things that get excessive and are very easy to spot. And, there was a humorous detective show, Monk, in the United States. He had OCD, couldn't step on a crack, and everything had to be, touched by someone else, and because he had germ phobia and all, and it was made sort of humorous. But a little bit, without the humor, you could see in real life that that's a miserable way to have to try to live. It rules the person. But those are the easiest to get in and get help. And there's some medications that will help that. But some of these others, no. It takes therapy for the rest of their lives. And if you can't get them to realize there's something wrong with them, like the obsessive compulsive personality disorder, as I said, they think they're perfect and no one else is. So you're not going to get them as an adult to accept that they've got an issue. And so a handful of people around them cope with it, and usually marriages don't handle it. But, there'll be some others that will. But if they find out that or think, you're all cut off. I was cut off. But it was okay. It ended up, I talked to Dr. H about it, had a session, how do I handle this? And was told that this is how the friendship will be, you'll have to cater and enable the person, constantly feed the disorder. That will be your friendship. And I was advised, given my situation with my pain disability and can't really do much socially, that I need friendships that I'm not feeding a disorder. It's a lot of energy and work to do that. You have to make sure you're building the person up. And I don't think it ever would have worked because the person knew that I knew and was very upset because that person can't accept it, any imperfection. And so it became very upset. I felt terrible. And I didn't even say directly, but she found out that I saw it. And so it was very unfortunate. Is before I could have just sort of coasted along with it, not being in proximity, but it's a hard thing to do though, because that you're feeding something that isn't, that it's just sort of a fraud. You have to do to go along with it. And I'd sort of done that even with my either sociopath or psychopath husband. Finally, just did whatever to keep the marriage together. That was all it was. I finally, found out, realized he'd been cheating all the time and lied all the time. I realized it was all lies. Finally started paying attention to my inner knowings and then could validate. Finally started validating things, which is not a fun way to live. To always be finding out, getting out there to find out, is this true or not? And then you don't dare confront them, because they do get violent then and aggressive, and it gets dangerous. So it can be a real problem. And the more we know, I think the better off we are. Pray for the people, pray for ourselves. But a big part of it is making sure that we stay in bounds, that we don't have excessive in any one aspect, because we all have parts of these things. We all have aspects, because it's personality. It's when the personality becomes disordered. And as I said, the sexual disorder, I consider, and I think, that's probably why the political push won out. It's not as much harm to anyone else. And OCD, that strict OCD, it's a harm to themselves and other people having to enable them and take care of, help them with their phobias, obsessions. But it's a real handicap, and that one, something like that can be helped. And I think sometimes the sexual ones can be helped too, or at least not do things to children, not help further an ideology when they're young. And most children, psychologically, boys and girls, have wondered if they were the opposite sex, usually between the ages of like 5 and 7. Go through that. What varies for boys and girls. Gender makes a difference as to what age they have these questions, or even wishing that they were a boy or wishing they were a girl. Briefly, they outgrow it. But if it is encouraged, see, but then when they get older and they realize that no, that shouldn't have been encouraged by whoever, family member, parents, other kids, teasing, bullying, so, or just being mean and or ignorant, not understanding that child over there is going through a phase and wants to wear boys' clothes or wants to wear be more girlish acting, trying it out as a child. So, and parents and grandparents can do a lot to help explain these things to their children, to not do something to another person, not make comments at all. And be grateful that they are acting out their own ideologies that maybe they had when they were 5, 6, or 7, or 8 years old, or 4. So, learning, knowledge, understanding, and working on ourselves are big steps to this, and practicing the virtues will help us the most, keeping our personalities in line. The spiritual life is a healing, healthy guide of balance, gift from God, and working cooperatively with the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit and the however many gifts of the fruit of the Holy Spirit, to cooperate with the gifts that we're given and the fruit we're given, and then the virtues. So, and pray and a lot of compassion for others. But as adults, we have to be aware and then keep wide-eyed and knowledgeable, and not get connected with people who have personality disorders that are of the type that can become a real detriment to our lives. in serious ways and in lifelong ways. It can affect us. It certainly affected my life. And all through, even though I was divorced, and the judge saw through and let us move across country, which was rare, especially in that state, for a wife to be able to take the children 2,200 miles away, boom, like that. But that judge saw through the last 3 or 4 minutes of court. And thanks be to God. But even being that far away, I had to constantly deal, even so. And the kids, even though they had very little visitation they had to do, even the little bit. But then when he found another victim, this other woman and her 3 children, they were safer then to visit because of the 3 children. They were abused and emotionally and somewhat physically at times. And so their childhoods were bad. And the woman she didn't get out of it. At least when I saw, I got out of it. It was like, this is it. I drew a line. And he crossed it, and that was that. But a little too late even, but in time. My kids had a chance then for some, but it still affected them very much. And it's sad, because it's hard for them to see it. It's their dad. They don't want to see, it's hard to see someone as that sick. But he's successful. The ones that, he's successful. How could that be? Well, they're successful people. It's not a mental illness that disables. It's a personality disorder, and all that manipulation and conning and all that. They do tend to not stay in jobs for long, but they keep moving on. If they're in the right career, people give recommendations to move them on, to get rid of them, so they won't get sued for unlawful termination or whatever. So, because there's all kinds of laws. That was in California on top of it, so extra protection. But it was called the dance of the lemons. Move them on to even a better spot just to get rid of them. More pay and whatever. About every 3 years, 2 to 3 years. It took about that before people would sort of catch on. So they lie through their interviews, and so they can be very successful. Very charming, very glib, as it says. So just beware. And it's, I took my son out of a classroom. I don't know what issue the guy had, but he did. I sensed. And he wasn't good to my son. I knew that, so I got him out. And then a half year later, he was arrested for having, at the same time, he had been molesting his stepdaughter. So manipulated her and molested her repeatedly in his car to take her out. The wife at home with the 2 younger daughters. So, at least I knew something was wrong with that guy. And it's sad, but we've got to do what we can do. All right, that's enough. That's a worldly video here, but it's worth knowing, I think. Very much so. God bless His real presence in us, and let us help the world, help people, help build up through ourselves, striving for health, psychological health and personality health. Talk to you later. God bless this world and the people in it.